myself. But my name is Aaron. I get to be the location pastor here at Real Life Church Mountain Home. And then I also get to lead our student ministry. But today I get to bring the message for you, the word. And we're going to lean into a moment that someone steps into leadership and influence and follows someone significant and a mentor in their lives. And I hope this speaks to every single one of us in the room, especially those who are graduating or stepping into something new, or maybe you right now as you sit in your seat and you're wondering what is next. You're trying to discern where to go, what God has in store for you, why you're even in the situation that you are in. And so today, if you got a notebook or if you just titled at the top of your phones, if you would just title the message today as an encouragement, Tassels and Chapters. Tassels and chapters. You see, we use this symbol that I just recognized and I just shared of the tassel. We can remember this moment, but God didn't intend for us to just stay in a moment, but continue to grow and to step into new ones. And so this moment may be a long ways away from where you're at now. How many of you you're like, I don't even remember graduation night. Like, that was so far long ago. Like, I don't remember. Like me, it was 13 years ago, I recognized this morning. I was like, golly, 13 years ago was when I graduated high school. 31 hit a whole lot harder than 30 did. Let me just tell you that. And but I remember, like, high school is like kind of like the big one. You get the people you grew up with, the people that have shaped and molded what your future is going to look like, the memory, so much that is built in high school. And that tassel can hold such a moment of remembrance and recollection, but it has so much more in store for your future and what you've accomplished and what you can step into. So for those of us in the room today that you're like, you know what, I don't know if I remember the tassel moment. Let me show you this and encourage you with this. You recognize and know that every single one of our lives is a story that's being written. It's a book. And there are chapters after chapter after chapter. And every chapter when you read builds upon the previous chapter. How many of you read a book and you skip ahead a little bit and you're like, well, wait, I forgot I don't know what happened over here, so you got to go back and read. And then when you read a book and you can get into a chapter that is like, it's just right on the edge and it feels so good and you love what's happening, and then all of a sudden it cuts off and it jumps to the new chapter and it's a totally different side of the story. Whatever chapter you find yourself in today, God is in the middle of it. You have moments in life that are valley moments. And it's in the valleys that none of us want to stay in the valley. But it's those moments in the chapter of the valley that we learn some of the greatest things that God has for us. You draw near to him and you seek him and he heals you and he restores you and he causes you to rest. And in the valley moments, it's hard. And we want to get through those valley moments and those chapters. But the mountaintop moments, those chapters that are full of blessing and full of accomplishment and their achievement and it feels good, we want to stay in the mountaintop chapters. And we can look back. But you know what you also get to do on the mountaintop? You also get to look forward to what's coming next. And usually what's coming next also has another valley in the middle of it that we're going to step into. But God is in the middle of every single chapter of your life, and every piece of it builds upon the next one until the story unfolds and the book is finished and we get to spend glory with him and fulfill what he created for us. But where we sit right now, the chapter that you find, how does that fit? How do I get through this today? We're going to talk about a guy today named Joshua. Everyone say Joshua. Joshua chapter 1 is what I'm going to read. And to just give you a little introduction to who he is and what's taking place in this moment. Joshua has been serving under Moses for several years. And Moses is the guy that God chose and called to lead the people out of Egypt and out of slavery and out of captivity. And so he's been following him and he's been watching him. He's been learning from him. And Moses is raising up another leader. But in between Moses and Joshua, there's another generation of people that are now sitting in a season that they aren't too crazy about where they are because they're in the wilderness. And they've been in the wilderness for 40 years. And it was supposed to take about 11 days on a journey. They've been there for 40 years now. And God's provided. He's given them the food that they need. He's promised them to go, that they're on their way to the promised land. He's taken them out of captivity and out of slavery. But there is a group of people in this moment that even though this moment is uncertain, God has promised us miracles and he's provided, There's some of them that are saying, well, maybe we should just go back to Egypt. Maybe we should go back to the slavery. Maybe we should go back to the captivity. Maybe we should go back to the bondage. Because if we go back there, at least we know that we're going to have a roof over our heads. We're going to have 3 meals a day. We're going to be somewhat taken care of. They want to go back to what's predictable. Because it is a whole lot easier, church, to live in predictability than to trust God for the miracle. And right now we begin to see where Joshua steps in because he remembers that God is a God of miracles and he keeps his promises. So Joshua has been one that Moses has been mentoring and raising up. And there's a season where Moses sends out 12 spies and to go and to look at the land that God has promised. And he sends them out, and when the spies come back, 10 of them show up and say, hey, God may have said that was supposed to be our land, but there's no possible way that we can make that become our land because there's giants, there's enemies, there's the Amalekites, there's the Canaanites, there's the Jebusites, there's the bug bites, and there's not even any bagel bites, but there's all the other kind of ites in this land. I'm glad you laughed at that. All the enemies are there. There's no possible way. But there was 2 that came back and said, that land, yeah, it's got giants. It's got enemies. But if God told us, then it's ours. And in that land, it's a land that's flowing with milk and honey, no more manna. It's a land that has wells to where we can have good water. It's a land that has dwellings and homes and fortresses and protections and things. That land is what God's calling us to, that he said that's ours. That enemy, we don't have to worry about him. 10 came back and said, what God has told us is ours, we can't go get. 2 came back and said, we can do it. And one of those was Joshua. And so we watch this season as Joshua is being raised up in this moment. And so it leads to a moment that Moses is beginning to fade. He's beginning to die. And Joshua has spent intentional time learning from him. And it says this in Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. You turn there with me if you got a Bible. If not, it'll be on the screen. Don't have pride in this moment. If you got to look at the table of contents, look at the table of contents. We're all human here, all right? We're all on different journeys. But Joshua chapter 1, verse 1 through 5. And it says this. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua over the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you. Just as I promised to Moses, from the wilderness in this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, to the great sea, toward the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you, and I will not forsake you. We begin to see Joshua step into his calling in this moment as Moses has now died, and he's now stepping into being the leader of the people. And as I get into our points for the day and the text for the day, I want to encourage every single one of you today to know that every single one of you are a leader. Every single one of you. All of us are leaders. All of us have influence. It's a matter of how we leverage it and how we look at it. You are either leading people up or you're leading people down. You're influencing people up or you're influencing them down. But every single day you have the opportunity to make a difference in a life that is around you and near you. I remember when I was in 7th grade, I got 2 stories from 7th grade I'm going to share for you today because that was a moment of transition in my life. I was moving schools. And I remember in 7th grade, I went from a small school and I went to a little bit bigger school. And I spent all summer going to workouts and open gyms for basketball as I was joining that team. And I remember the first day of 7th grade when we walked into practice. We didn't get a ball. We didn't get jerseys. We didn't put our shoes on. We sat in a locker. And our coach walked around and he gave us handouts. And he gave us a list of expectations and standards. And he gave us a poem. And that poem was, "There are little eyes watching you." As a 7th grader, was the first moment that I began to look and say, you know what? This isn't just about my ability. This isn't just what I bring to the table as an athlete. I'm a part of a culture now. I'm a part of an expectation. And in that moment, it began to shift. And the weight was a little bit different than it was previously, because in that poem, it talked about how the little ones that are behind you are watching what you're doing in every place that you're at. They're not just watching you on the basketball court. They're watching you when you walk the hallways. They're watching you when they see you at Walmart. They're watching you when you go to the grocery store. They're watching you with the gas pumps. They're watching you in how you treat your parents. They're watching you all around. There are little eyes that are watching you. And it began to add, and I began to look, and I began to reflect. It wasn't just the little ones that are watching, but there's a community that's watching. And it may be the little eyes that are watching, but it's also the ones that are older that are watching you too, because they are attached to that culture. And there is an expectation for you to live out the standard of that culture. And so every single one of us are someone that leads and influences, but we just have the opportunity to lead and influence. And how do we leverage that? What direction do we take them? So the first point in this, and when you're leading, when you're stepping into something, is to know God's pleasure for you. That he takes delight in you, that he has created and called you for a specific purpose and significant things greater than the season that you find yourself in right now. Whether it's the valley that you're grinding it out and you're learning in, or it's the mountaintop that feels like the best moment of your life, God has pleasure for you, and there's something more significant even on the way beyond. And so as we begin to look at this, we know that we are children of God. God has called us. We've been set apart. He's created us for a purpose. And I can give you so many feel-good verses about the way he's created you and the way he's called you and kind of puff you up a little bit, to have some confidence and boldness to step into what's coming next. But it's not as easy to step into what's coming next when you don't have what's been given to you, or you don't feel like you have what's been given to you and God's called you to. But Joshua has been intentional in these moments. He's been intentional in learning and growing from Moses. Now, Moses didn't do everything perfect. He made some mistakes along the way. And he actually made some mistakes and sinned in such a way that was so significant that God calls him out to the mountaintop and he has him look over the promised land. Because based on his mistakes and the way he led in a season, he will now not get to step into the promised land. Church, let me tell you, the way that you lead absolutely matters. The way you listen and obey God absolutely matters, because there are very few leaders who lead in the way that ends well. You know, Moses was celebrated for 30 days after he passed away. They honored him in that, but Moses didn't get to step into the promise of what God had in store for him because of some of the choices that he intentionally made against God. And so someone else had to step into what God had originally intended for Moses to lead it. And so in these moments, was Joshua was watching. He watched Moses. And he watched that when he would go into the tabernacle and he would meet with God and he would talk with God, that there was a pleasure that he found in seeking God. There was a joy that he had. And then he noticed that God intentionally wanted to have a relationship with Moses. He noticed that there was moments that he was intentional in his worship, because when he praised God, they were able to advance. There was a moment where Joshua was called and he was promoted to general of the army. And Moses was up on that mountain and he was worshiping God and he was watching the enemy attack. And Joshua was the one leading the charge. And Moses would have his rod above his head and he would have his hands lifted high. And he was worshiping God and he was praying to God and he was seeking God. And the moment that his arms would drop, the enemy would be able to advance and they would take ground. And Joshua, who was the one that was leading the army on the grounds that day. But the moments that he had someone with him, and Aaron and Hur would lift his arms as he was tired and as he was exhausted, and would hold his arms up high, they were able to take ground and defeat the enemy. And Joshua, who was the one who paid note and paid attention to this, and so he was being intentional in the process and knowing that God had pleasure for Moses, he would have pleasure for him also. And every single one of us in the room today, God has something significant for you because he takes delight and pleasure in you. He calls you precious. He desires you. You are not here by accident. You are not in the season that you are in by accident. I think so many times we get it misconstrued that when we say yes to following Jesus, that makes everything better. It doesn't make everything better, okay? It's still going to be difficult, but it means every season is going to have a purpose. And Jesus is going to walk with you and encourage you and lead you and help you learn and grow in a season for what's coming next. It's not a matter of everything in your life being better. It's about the purpose that you are going to fulfill. See, just because you may sit at the second, third, or a different level in your organization, there are moments, how many of you had a moment that you've looked at your leader or you've thought in your head, you're like, I would do that totally different. Or I would do that better. That's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it can be based on your posture and your heart. But a lot of the times it just shows that you care. And you're a leader and you want something to be better. But in the season that you sit to submit and to carry out a vision and to carry out a heart. And when God grows you up and you learn and you submit and you can step into his season, maybe you can take it further than what it once was. Because when you lead a legacy, you don't leave a legacy, you lead one, because someone else can pick it up and take it further than what you had. You don't leave it behind. Someone else is taking it and going further. And so in this, God takes pleasure for you, and he has a great plan that is greater than your plan. And how do you know, how can I say that his plan is better than what your plan is? It's because I've experienced it. Let me just tell you a little bit about how we ended up at Real Life Church in Mountain Home, Arkansas. When my family moved when I was growing up from Oklahoma City, we moved to a little bitty town in Arkansas. My dad became a pastor. And then after a few years, he planted a church and someone else became the pastor of that church. So we were still semi-connected to it. After my dad passed away, my senior year, we started going back to that church. It's where I surrendered my call to ministry in that church. I interned at that church. I served full-time at that church. I was on staff in some capacity for almost 7 years at that church. Grew up there, learned a ton, and was passionate about that church, about that house. And there were things and there were seasons that God was showing me that there could be something else. I even had one of my bosses one day call me into his office, and he pulled up a job listing for another church. And he said, you know what? I just want you to know that there's other things that are out there that God may have in store for you. And I almost called to report him for that, okay? Being like, no, this is the only thing. This is what we're on. This is what we do. And I missed several times where I should be submitting to God. Because you know what I did? In your homes and in your lives, this is what you do. First, you honor God. Then you honor your family. And then you honor what's next. In my calling to serve the church and be a part of the church, I got it messed up. And I was honoring the church. And then I was honoring God. And then I was honoring my family. And that order doesn't work. And so I walked in on a Monday and got called in at the end of the day. It was 3 o'clock. I remember because I got to go early after this. I got called in, and a few people were in the room, and a few were on the phone. And they said, hey, Aaron, we just want to let you know that we appreciate you, we love you, we value you, we're grateful for what you've done in your heart for this place, but we're going to let you go, and you got 60 days to find something else. I'm like, oh, wait a second. Did you just say what I think you just said? Because I know you're not firing me. Like, of all people here, you're not firing me. And it hit hard because what I found value in was in the wrong place. And so I walked out, and I went and got in the car. They're like, you can go ahead and go home. Went in, got in the car. Was on my way to go pick up Beckham. Beckham was 4 months old at this time. So yeah, add that in the mix there. Without a job, as a father, as a husband, 4-month-old. Called one of my friends, and I was like, dude, I just got let go. He's like, do I need to call him? Like, I'll call him right now and be like, hey, y'all messed up on this one. Like, you don't know what you're doing. And I was like, no, you don't do that, because you're going to say some stuff that I wouldn't say, and it's going to get us both in trouble. So don't call anyone. You're the only person I'm calling right now. Got home, told Kaylee, and like, I'm telling you, when our world crashed, didn't know where to go or what to do. So I spent the next few days, again, didn't tell anybody, just kind of what is next, what's supposed to happen. It's all fresh, it's all real. And then that Thursday, I got a random phone call from a random number. And if you guys ever, you don't answer those phone calls. If it's a random number, you're not answering it, okay? It's usually me. And I answered the phone, and it was Pastor Vince. And he said, hey, I don't know if you know who I am or you remember our church or you know anything about us, but we're going to be looking to hire a student pastor in a couple months. And a friend of mine said that you might be interested. Not the same friend that I told on Monday. The other one, this one just said, give him a shot. Call him, see what's up. And I was like, it's interesting that you call because on Monday I actually got told I got 60 days left. So he apologized and we walked through that and we just talked church for a little bit. Hey, what might be next? And I was like, you know what? I don't know. But honestly, I don't think I want to do ministry for a season. I want to go make some money. I want to start something. I want to start my own clothing line, or I want to go do something I want to make a shoe store. I don't know what I want to do. I think maybe we move to Oklahoma City because I'd love to be in a place where just on a random night we can go catch a Thunder game. And man, last night was hard. The playoff loss, done for the year. But maybe we can go catch a Thunder game. Maybe we can be around family. It's kind of different. A lot of people want to move here and protect their kids. I was like, I want to go somewhere different. I want to give them experiences and adventures. And he's like, hey, whatever it is that God has in store for you, if it's entrepreneurship, if it's to go make money, if it's to move somewhere else, he's like, all I can want for you is God's best for you. And I said, thank you. And I'll let you know if I'm interested. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to Oklahoma City, go to a friend's church. They got an open position. We'll see if it works out in your family. So hung up, went to Oklahoma City a couple of weeks later, and we were talking, hanging out, and this would have been a church that everybody in the church world, in the church circle would have been like, man, this is a good spot. It's church on easy mode. You're making good money. People are just showing up because that's just the thing to do. It's the place to be. And we were talking, and I loved the people that were there. And we were just like, man, it's not, what's off in this? What's not clicking? We're friends. We should want to do this together. And I'm I don't know. So we left and just kind of left it at that. And on the way home, Pastor Vince called and said, hey, how was your weekend? How was your birthday? How's your family? All that kind of stuff. I was like, it was good. And we just walked through the process. And he's like, hey, if you're interested, we'd be interested. I was like, I don't know. I thought if it was going to be something, it was going to be this. I've got a call from a church in DFW. I've got a call from a church in Phoenix. And so we may look at some of that. And he's like, hey, whatever God has in store for you, I'm for. And so left it at that. That weekend, an ice storm hit. And so we canceled services at our church that I was still fulfilling my responsibilities at. And that morning, Kaylee looked at me and said, hey, I think they're having services still. Do you want to drive over and see what it's like? I said, yeah, let's just drive. Let's just confirm this is not what we want to do, okay? Who wants, you got to recognize here, Kaylee's from Harrison, and she was homecoming queen. And so to move to Mountain Home is a significant thing. And so I was like, yeah, whatever. Drop Beckham off with your mom. We'll load up. We'll go. We pulled in the parking lot. People are out front, waving, greeting, parking, all that kind of stuff in the sleet. I'm like, hey, it's I'm a church investigator, a church assessor. And so I'm like, okay, cool. This is what you should be doing. You're not impressing me yet. This is what you should be doing. And then we walk in the doors, and I'm like, it's a cool building, cool spot, kind of fresh, kind of new. And we walked I went to go grab coffee, and I got to the coffee spot, and I was out. I was done. Nope, this isn't the spot. Because at that time, we were serving coffee out of styrofoam cups. And you laugh, but I already had the excuse to say you're settling. And if you're settling in the small things, I'm not going to be settling somewhere that settles for the larger things. And so we came in, we sat down, we sat right over here in this section. We sat in this section about 2/3 of the way back. And just as he does every other Sunday, Pastor Vince walks the aisles around, and he stopped there and he talked with us for a moment. And then we rolled out. We hit the bypass. And when we hit the bypass, Kay looked at me and said, you're not feeling it? I said, no, I'm not feeling it. Styrofoam cups. She's like, I knew you wouldn't be about that. I'm not feeling it. So we got home, did the VIP process again, because again, I'm watching everything. I got to find the detail that shows me that God's not in this. And so all that goes down, VIP process, follow up, all that good stuff. And Monday or Tuesday, PV calls, and he's like, hey, thanks for being here. Can you give me some feedback? Like, what can we improve in? It's like, well, at least he's asking the right question and get better coffee and get better cups. That's the first thing. Well, I'm telling you, that's the first thing I said. VIP process is great. Parking lot was great. Worship was great. Fix your coffee. He's like, we just had never thought about that, but thank you. He said, if you're interested, let us know. I was like, oh, I think that kind of confirmed that we're not interested. And he's like, okay, that's good. A little bit later, he called and said, hey, we need someone to preach in a couple weeks because like our student pastor's done. Like, can you just come preach on Wednesday night? He's like, yeah, I'll come preach. So we walked in the doors on a Wednesday. Next door just got just about done being finished, remodeled, and walked in, and there's about 100 students over there. And there were some I could see and I could tell that were influential, that were going to step out and they were going to do something. And I walked in and they were serving bagels that were left over from Sunday morning. They did one worship song and then I preached. And I'm thinking, why are we showing up? Like, what are we doing? Like, what's the draw here? And my wheels began to turn. And God began to reveal something, that you are stuck in a season that is comfortable and predictable, and I need you to learn and I need you to grow. And this is the opportunity that I want you to step into. You've told me no and you've told me never time and time again. And now I've made you remove yourself from a situation. And I'm trying to get you to recognize that it doesn't have to check all your boxes. It's got to check mine. And so that night, I was like, you know what? What's tomorrow look like? He's like, well, it's an all-staff day, so our part-timers will be here and the rest of our staff. And I said, can we do an interview tomorrow? He's like, yeah, absolutely. So the executive came in. We spent all morning in interviews. They talked with me. They talked with Kaylee. They took care of Beckham while we were here. And come Monday, we said, you know what? Let's do this. Let's jump in. Like, this is obviously something that God is orchestrating, and I'm the roadblock in it. And I want to step into God's will for my family and for our future. And so in that, we get to be here for 5 years now. We get to see moments like students lining the stage and people like you who are stepping out in influence. And God continue to work in me and in my family because I trusted that he had pleasure for me that was greater than even in the moments when I can look in the mirror and kind of get excited and proud of myself. God's even more proud of me than I am of me. But we got to step into the obedience part of it. And delayed obedience or partial obedience is always disobedience and not in the will of God. And I want to be in the will of God. And sometimes those steps to step into something different aren't going to make sense to you, and they're definitely not going to make sense to some of the people that are around you. Because God doesn't operate in a way that we think. He thinks in ways that are beyond our ways and the ways that we think. And so in that, God is maybe calling you to something different. And that the next part is this, is if what he's calling you into, claim his provision for you. Claim his provision for you. It says this in verse 3. For every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. He's affirming and reaffirming something that these people have already heard for years. That land is yours. And just like I told Moses before you, everywhere you step foot, Joshua, everywhere that you lead, that ground is yours because I am with you and I will provide for you. You see, God reminds Joshua of this, and Joshua is one that Moses changes his name by direction of God. And originally his name was Hoshea, which means Yahweh or Jehovah is salvation. And every single one of you that have said yes to following Jesus and have salvation should recognize that you are now attached to the name of Jesus because you are a child of God. And victory is yours because you have the name of salvation. And so Joshua is a person in this, a leader in this moment that knows victory is his because it is literally his name. Names matter. They're significant. And so as Joshua is walking this, he knows that God is providing and he's been equipping him in every single one of these chapters because every single chapter builds upon the other one. You can't skip parts of the book. You got to be where you're at and learn and grow in the moment. How many of you have kids that you walk by in your living room and you walk by the couch and you hear this and you hear, I'm hungry. And then like you walk by again and they go like, I'm hungry. Like they're really trying to get your attention. Or it's the moment that you're headed home and they're like, hey, can we swing through and can we get something at McDonald's? Can we get something from Wendy's? Can we get some Taco Bell? And you're like, no, we have food at home. It's a pretty common occurrence, isn't it? But here's the deal. We do the same thing with God, and I want you to catch what I'm saying here. The provision that you need to eat was already in the kitchen. You just had to get up and go prepare it. You had to put the work in. It's already been there. And so as a parent, you're saying, you want to know, I've already provided you with what you need for sustenance and to live and for nurture, for nutrients. I've already given you that. But you got to get up and you got to walk to the kitchen. You got to get the plate out. You got to get the knives out. You got to get the bread out. You got to get the meat out. You got to get all the fixings that you want on it. Because I've already given it to you. I've already provided it, but I need you to walk. In so many seasons, this is where we are with God. God's already provided, but we're really afraid to do this. And we get to this spot, and we don't know where our feet is because your feet have to be where your faith is. They can't get ahead of the process. They got to be. So if your feet are in a moment right now where God is developing something in you, He's stirring something in you, pray and seek, pray and seek, pray and seek. And as you step out of that season and into a next one, you continue to pray and seek, and now you begin to develop. And the dream begins to grow, and it begins to cultivate. He begins to refine, and he begins to show you. And you continue to pray and seek, but where your feet are, you develop. And so you've gone from deliverance to development, and then you can step into destiny. And you pray and seek through the whole process, trusting God in all of it. Because you will be in a season of deliverance, you will be in a season of development, or you will be in a season of destiny. And you'll get to look on the mountaintop and you'll get to look back for a second and say, that was really cool and I learned this. And what I learned, I'm gonna turn, I'm gonna look, and that valley is a whole lot bigger and a whole lot deeper than what the last one is, but that mountaintop's higher. And I'm going for it. But here's the deal. Every single one of you are leaders. But the opportunity to step into leading first takes submitting. And if you have the mindset, not the heart set, because if you are following Jesus, you should have the heart to serve every day of your life because that's what he did. But if you're sitting in a moment and you're too big to submit and to serve, then you will always too small to lead. If you are too big to submit and to serve, you will always be too small to lead. Because that means that you're in the front of it and not God. And first and foremost, you got to submit to him, to serve him, to lead out what he's calling you to. You cannot shortcut the process. What are you learning in the moments? Leaders are always learning. In whatever valley and whatever mountaintop, what can I learn in this moment? God, what are you revealing to me? What are you showing to me? And so we know that God has pleasure for us. He's going to provide. And the third thing is this: rest in his presence in you. Verse 5 says that no man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will also be with you. And I will not leave you or forsake you. I'm not going to leave you, and I'm not going to forget about you, because I am always with you. The Holy Spirit within you, leading you and guiding you, encouraging you, giving you courage, comfort, confidence, and whatever it is you face. So I mentioned that 7th grade moment, joining that basketball team. See, actually, after a few days on that team, I decided I didn't want to be a part of that culture or part of that commitment or part of that expectation. And so I would almost venture to say that this is the only moment in my life that I ever quit something. And so I quit basketball for a couple of years. And it wasn't easy because people ask me all the time, why'd you quit? We wanted you on our team. My family's asking me, why'd you quit? You were so good. Like, I came from another school where, like, I was the dog, I was the dude, and everyone's like, why'd you bail? It's like, I wasn't that anymore. I was gonna have to work, and I didn't want to work. And so in that moment, at that school, if you weren't in athletics, you had to take PE. And so I had to get into a PE class. And my 7th grade PE class had a couple 9th graders in it. And there was this 9th grader named Robert. And Robert was the first bully that I ever experienced. And I remember for weeks that I would walk into that locker room and I would try and beat Robert there and try and get out before he did, because I knew if he showed up in that moment, he never beat me, but man, he intimidated me. I mean, he would put me up on the lockers, he would pin me like he was gonna do something. And he would act big, and it had me, I was a 7th grader, I was scared. I was a little bit shorter, and I was a little bit chubbier then, okay? And I remember one night we were at a basketball game, and my mom, some of the basketball boys, they were in her class and stuff, and of course we were friends and everything now. And we were chilling, and we're watching this game, and we're goofing off, and Robert walked into the gym, and my whole demeanor changed. Like, I was scared. Even though there's 1,000 people in there, I was scared. Like, what's gonna happen? And they said, hey, what? Like, they started, hey, what happened? Like, what's wrong? Like, what? I didn't have a phone, so it wasn't like I got some random text message or something. Like, what's wrong? I was like, no, I'm good. And they're like, no, you're not. What's up? And I said, that dude over there, he's a bully. He picks on me. I'm scared of him. And so a couple of the high school boys heard, and they're like, oh, really? I was like, yeah. And they're like, okay. I walked into PE the next day, and Robert didn't come anywhere near me. I don't know what they did. I don't know what happened, but they took care of it. And there are so many situations. Like, there was moments I was like, you know what, maybe I can get cocky about this and be like, hey, Robert, hey, you can't touch me, bro. I don't know what they did, but they obviously got my back, and you can't come at me. You can't touch me. That's dangerous. Like, I didn't do that because that's just asking for trouble. But I knew someone somewhere had my back and stood up for me. They stood in the middle and said, hey, you're not gonna mess with him. And if you would recognize that God has already done the same thing for you, that you have victory tied to your name, and you can step in with confidence and boldness to whatever situation you face because he has gone before you. The cross on Calvary held every single victory to whatever struggle or battle you face every single day if you would trust him with it. But I want to give you this just to close. As Joshua led these people, in this moment, he led them across the Jordan. Did you know that they actually crossed the river more than one time? It wasn't just Moses that led them across, but Joshua did too later. 2 miles wide, they crossed 2 million people. And Joshua led them across. But I want to give you some names real quick to close this out. Tell me, just raise your hand in the room today if you've ever heard this name, or I'm going to say if you ever heard this name, because some of you have probably read the Bible. But if you know somebody that has this name, Shemua. Anyone know a Shemua? Not Shamu, it's a whale, but Shemua. Okay. Shaphat, Egal, Palti, maybe a Paul, but not a Palti. Okay. Gadil, Gadi, Emil, Sether, Nabi. Nabi's kind of a cool one. Gul, no one. Okay? How many of you have heard the name Caleb or know someone named Caleb? How many of you know a Joshua? You know what? Those 10 names are the 10 spies that went into the land and came back and said, hey, we can't do it. We don't talk about them anymore. There's not a legacy tied to them. But Caleb and Joshua that came back, there are still people being named Caleb and Joshua to this day. That is a legacy. That is victory. That is God showing that when you step in boldness and faith and say, hey, what I've already promised you, when you recognize my presence within you, that I'm going to provide you, that I have pleasure in you, then people are going to remember what I'm calling you to. If you would trust me in the process and step into calling rather than just being in the middle of what everybody else says you should do, trust me that I have something greater for you than what the world has for you. Jesus grew in wisdom and stature with God and with man. Be bold about what he's equipping you with. Be bold about what he's developing you in. Be able to walk into the calling knowing that you're obeying God in every season. And lead the legacy so someone else can take it further rather than just leaving it behind for someone else to maybe pick up at some point in time. Church, let's pray. Father, we thank you. God, we give you all the glory and the honor in these moments. God, and above all things, we're grateful that you are holy. And God, I pray over every single one of these people. God, whatever it is they're walking through, whatever it is they're carrying, whatever season and chapter of life they are in, God, that they turn the tassel and they just don't use it as a moment to recall and remember the greatness of where they've been, but God, to step into even greater that you have in store. God, I pray that they rest in the peace and the assurance that you care about them. God, that you will provide for them. God, that you are within them, leading and guiding them, and you will never leave them or forsake them. And they have victory in whatever they face when they trust you with it. God, I pray for the families right now. God, that the generations of the past, God, are being broken in the curses and the bondage of what's being defined. But God, there is something new on the horizon. God, that influence and stature would grow in households. God, that fathers and husbands would step out in boldness to lead their homes. God, that wives would submit and support the household. God, that they'd be able to step into whatever you were calling them into. God, to be an example to their kids and their families. God, I pray right now, whatever it is that the enemy has spoken against the people in this room, they're saying, God, this isn't God. God, that you affirm them, God, you comfort them, and your peace that surpasses all understanding and your love would be embracing upon them in this moment. God, I pray we pursue you. God, we seek you. God, and we be in your will and confidence and boldness of what you have in store. God, we thank you and we praise you and we give you all the glory and honor. In Jesus' name, amen.